Hey, it's Mena. Welcome back to my channel, or if this is the very first video that you're seeing of me, then welcome to my channel. Please be sure to hit the subscribe button down below if you didn't already. I post every day of the week for a while. And today in this video, I'm going to talk about my top 10 top 10 supplies I would recommend for beginner knitters. Now, I know there's a lot of people who love to knit. Or if you're a beginner and you want to learn how to knit, I have some great ideas for supplies for beginner knitters. Now, this is just a suggestion if you are a beginner of knitting, and if you want to practice knitting, you can try out these supplies for a beginner. But if you have a different thing you prefer for knitting as a beginner, if you already knitted and you're a beginner and you have something different that you prefer, that's totally okay. We're all different. I'm going to talk about all the supplies that I like using for when I was a beginner knitter, and I'm going to get started. And if I missed any other supplies, please let me know what they are down in the comments below, and I'm going to get started. So number one on my list should have to be wood needles. Now, I do have several pairs of wood needles in this bag. A lot of them came from like kits and stuff. So I have a pair of wood needles right here. This came from a kid's kit. And they're two different color knobs. So these came in a set with the two different color knobs. The end one's red, one's blue. I know probably usually they have the same knitting needles that look identical. Like for example, here are a pair of identical knitting needles. These are plastic knitting needles by Red Heart and stuff. But these two needles I have right here, they came in a kit for kids. They had one blue, one red. Don't ask me why. They came like this. Why they had two different needle things. They just came like this in the kit. I recommend these for beginners, and they always say to use wood needles, even though I personally hate using wood needles. I've tried using them before when I first learned how to knit. I just didn't like them because I felt like the wood would get damaged, and they were just really hard for me to work with. Just the tips would just shave down and they would get so damaged. They were just not the best. And they always say to use wood needles when you're a beginner, because wood needles, the stitches don't slide off as much, because if you use metal like these right here, the stitches slide off. But I personally love using metal knitting needles because I find them a lot easier for me to work with, because they are just more comfortable for me, and I love working with metal because I just think the tips last a lot longer than they do on the wood or plastic needles, in my opinion. But it depends if you get cheap knitting needles. Number two on my list has to be plastic knitting needles, and I already showed you guys the plastic knitting needles I had. They also work really well because they don't slide off the knitting needle, and because they just don't slide off the knitting needle. The yarn doesn't slide off the knitting needle, and it just keeps your stitches on. Number three on my list should have to be thick yarn. So I have two examples of thick yarn. I have a Lion Brand Woolly's Thick and Quick in the color River Run, which is really pretty. I just got it today from Amazon. Well, it was an order I placed, and it shipped and it just came today. And then I have Lion Brand Color Made Easy in the color Pomegranate. So these are great examples of thick yarn. The only difference is these use size 10 needles and these use size 13. This use size 13. These are great for beginners because it's easier to see your stitches, and it helps your project knit up faster. And I know a lot of people love working with thick yarn. I know I'm definitely one who loves working with thick yarn because I find it a lot quicker for my projects. Number four on my list would have to be large needles, size 15 to 19. Now these are size 13 knitting needles, which I have right here. These come in handy for knitting because it's easier to see your stitches. And is also good for practice. And they're like really fun to They make it really fun for knitting because it makes your project go a lot faster. The bigger the needle, the bigger the stitch, the bigger your stitch, the faster your project will be. So these come in handy. So usually size 15 or 19 are good for beginners, but I have size 13 just because I already had them out and stuff, and I thought I'd show you. Number 5 on my list would have to be tapestry needle or large crochet hook. So the reason I recommend a size N crochet hook, even though I don't really have a size N crochet hook, I have a size 10. I have a J right here. 10 or J crochet hook, or this is also a 6mm crochet hook if you're from the UK. And tapestry needles are great for beginners because like these are good for in case you need to weave your ends in. I personally don't like leaving really long ends because I don't like wasting so much yarn unless I have to sew my piece together. So I just usually leave about 5 or 6 inch tail so I don't waste so much yarn. And I'm not very good at guesstimating when it comes to the long tail cast on. I know a lot of people here on YouTube love using long tail. I see so many people use long tail, but I personally just don't use long tail because I don't like leaving a huge tail of yarn because it always confuses me. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so I'm not one who leaves long tails to weave in. I'm kind of lazy when it comes to weaving in my ends, but I do weave them in so well that they don't come undone, pretty much. Number 6 on my list would have to be a row counter. So here is my row counter. My aunt and uncle got me this for Christmas a couple years ago. I love using this for knitting because it helps me keep track of my rows, and it works really, really well, and it saved a whole bunch of paper for me because before, when I was knitting, I would do tally marks, and I would use paper and pen and write down tally marks of which rows I was on, and that was like the way I could keep track of my rows. So my aunt and uncle got me this for Christmas one year, and it's a very special gift because this is the last present I got from my aunt and uncle together because my uncle had passed away from brain cancer in the year 2014, so this was one of the last gifts I got from them together besides my Hello Kitty pajamas. Besides just my Hello Kitty pajamas, and this is like a very special thing because I love to have it with me all the time because it makes me think of my uncle because this was the last present I got from both him and my aunt together at Christmas. And I just love this thing because it really comes in handy and it just helps me save so many trees unless I have to write 100 down on a piece of paper because this only goes up to 99. But they are a great way to keep track of your rows, so then you don't have to count all the way up from the bottom to the top if you already have so many rows. Number 7 on my list would have to be crochet hook. I don't even know why I wrote crochet hook again, but I think they're just really handy. So those come in handy also if you just drop a stitch, and I love using them because they are great for when you make mistakes or if you lose a stitch and you can just put it back on, or if you make a mistake a couple rows down and you undo it and then you can just use your crochet hook to pick up the stitch. Number 8 on my list should have to be measuring tape or ruler. So here I have a thing of measuring tape. I use this all the time for when I knit. It's kind of faded out or down right here, but it always comes in handy for when I knit because it helps me so then I don't do the guesstimate of measuring and stuff and then figure out how long I need to make things. This always helps me when I'm knitting because I love to, because whenever I have to knit a certain amount to a certain amount of inches, it just helps me keep track of like my knitting, and it's always good to use this for your gauge checking as well in case you don't have a one of those gauge trackers. Let me show you quickly what it looks like. So this is a gauge measuring tool. I don't know exactly what they're called. So I've seen people use these a lot in knitting. I had one, but I have no idea where mine went. So I never used it because I would never check my gauge in knitting. I'm really bad at that. Well, actually, I've gotten a little bit better, but I do not really check my gauge because I kept forgetting how to check my gauge, and I didn't understand how to check the gauge in knitting. So I never really did the gauge because I didn't understand how it worked. And those always come in handy for, like, those I hear are better for gauge tracking than a tape measure or ruler. And stuff, but a tape measure or ruler is a great way to measure the length for your knitting. Number 9 on my list would have to be bright colored worsted weight yarn. So here's an example of a bright colored yarn. This isn't really worsted weight, it's actually bulky. This is the We Are Knitters wool from my Happy Cushion kit. And a bright colored worsted weight yarn is a great way for knitting because it's easier to see your stitches and it helps your project knit up faster if you're a beginner. And it's just like so fun to work with. I love working with bright colors. I'm a huge fan of knitting with bright colors. Whereas if you didn't know. No, and I know some people probably don't like working with bright colors, but they are just easier to work with because it's easier to see where your stitches are rather than a darker colored yarn, in my opinion. Number 10 on my list would have to be scissors. So here are a pair of scissors I've had. I've had these since the 3rd grade. I use this all the time for cutting my yarn because these are my best knitting scissors because they really come in handy for when it comes to knitting for me because I find that they cut my yarn a lot faster with just one snip than half the other cheap scissors I bought. Well, I've had scissors for years. I've had several different scissors over the years. But these are my favorite ones because they cut my yarn way much better than half the other cheap scissors I've had. These are scissors I got from a school supplies kit from the Hello Kitty store. And I know they don't have Hello Kitty on them, but they used to have like a scissor case that had Hello Kitty on them. But I lost the scissor case years ago, and I think I got rid of it when I got rid of my old school supplies. So I got all my school supplies, and these came in the school supplies kit. And I use these scissors all the time because they cut my yarn way better than half the other cheap scissors I've had. I don't remember if these are cheap scissors, but they work so much better than cheap scissors. So I hope you guys, so that was my top 10 knitting supplies I would recommend for beginners. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I post every day of the week for a while. I'm sorry this video is so long, but thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you didn't already. I post every day of the week for a while, and I'll see you in every video soon. Bye!